Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures. Maybe past this guy's release date, but I have finally got my hands on a Khador Man of War Suppression Tanker. So I may not be the most up-to-date when it comes to the inner workings of how War Machine plays these days, but I have always had a soft spot for big Khador power armor. So when I saw this, and this is one of the tankers of which there are two variants. I think the other is like the Dominator or something. Similar idea, except it's got a big shoulder-mounted cannon on it rather than Gatling guns built into the shield. It's just a funky design. It is a solo. It's not actually a jack. Not that they have. I mean, I guess this is almost like something that could stand in for a light. Not that Khador's ever had light warjacks. But it looks like he is about the right size to be one. So, there's all our parts. We will get it built, though. 50mm base. And you can see here, this is a big suit. I've got the new, what were they, the suppressors. I'm going to grab those in a sec after we get this guy all cleaned up a little bit. I'm not liking that, and we're going to have to get those legs cleaned up. Here you can see the cannons built into the shield. He actually is holding onto the shield. You can see the ammo feeds right there. I'm going to take a wild guess that it is similar on the other side. And we've got, I don't know what those are for. Well then. What's on the back of them? Okay, there are what look like connector points on those pieces. My first thought was like some kind of a hip guard or something, but I don't really see a spot for it there. Nor do I see anything. Get those hands to fit in there is going to be interesting. I don't know if there's any excess resin in the way. But it's going to be a challenge to get things to line up in a way that I'm satisfied with. I'm going to go ahead and glue it together because obviously I want to get it painted, but I also want to see what the final piece looks like. So give me a sec, we will put them together and we will figure out where these metal bits go, and we'll see how he compares to some of the other Khador stuff I might have laying around. So if you want to see that, sit tight. So we've got the Suppression Tanker mostly put together. I changed my mind on actually gluing the arms on because there is no space whatsoever to get in there and try to get anything painted. So I realized that the only logical spot for those metal pieces was going to be some kind of an extra leg guard, knee guard, shin guard, armor guard, whatever you want to call it. And then I checked online and I was correct. So that's always good to see. In terms of size, I mean, he does take up the majority of that 50mm base. And while he is somewhat limited right now in his movement of his arms or positioning, that's easily changed. They have these little plugs right here that are keyed to the inside of his shoulder sockets there, so you can kind of get it. But there's basically no movement after that point. They're going to be stuck in front of him pretty much like so. Which is cool, but I would like to be able to see a little bit of the model, especially if I'm going to spend my time actually painting all of that in there. So I'm thinking, I guess you could probably just snip off that extra bit, and so it's just at a ball joint at that point. And it might be able to give you a bit more space to play with how to position those hands. I haven't figured that out yet. Funny thing, though, is I had held off on painting my Mark IV suppressors for the very reason that I was hell-bent on getting one of these before they really disappeared. I mean, they do have a nice look to them, and if you're not even into the Khador stuff, if you want some kind of funky steam-powered power armor, I don't think this is a bad choice of a model. So the Mark IV suppressors here, you can see they were a bit stripped down in terms of all that extra outside bulk. I mean, the plating on this is super thick, but it actually seems a little smaller, but I guess that's because they're going to be a bit more versatile. They're actually in squads now versus as a solo unit. Plus, you know, the pilot, wearer, whatever you want to call him, is actually carrying these shields, whereas on the updated suppressors, they have their hands inside of all that extra armor. But there's just so many empty points on it. It would worry me. Grabbing a traditional man-of-war trooper, this is the standard bearer, obviously. You can see it is a little bit smaller, not a whole lot. There's a lot more heavy armor on top of it than on the traditional one. But when you start getting into like some of the really fancy stuff like the Colden Lord's armor here, it's just maybe a head or two taller. So they are pretty much in scale, and then actually grabbing an actual Khador troop in somewhat standard armor just to give you an idea of how big these things are. This guy may be an exception more of the rule. He's got a huge head. He's not the most in scale. I love that figure, but yeah. Yeah, I would have grabbed my Sergeant Dragovich or whatever his name is with his dual power mauls, but I don't know where I put him. But you can see a good kind of cross-section of the various armors that Khador has been fielding outside of its warjacks. Still my favorite faction. Signar's bringing up some interesting stuff in Mark IV. I mean, I'll try to keep grabbing these just to see what's out there. I've always been a big fan of the power armor aesthetic of the War Machine Privateer stuff, so I know I'm a bit outdated in that, but that's just my preference. So I am happy to have this thing. Maybe we'll get around to getting the other variant at some future point. It is definitely an interesting looking model. Not every day you see guys wandering the battlefield with giant shields with Gatling guns attached to them. So fun, interesting model. All resin for the most part, if you don't count those knee pads. At this point, I think the challenge is really going to be just tracking one down, because, I mean, you know, these are from the tail end of Mark III War Machine, so they are getting a bit harder to find. If you've got access to them, hopefully you can get a good deal on them. I got a relatively good price on it, so I can't complain. And it is going to be a fun one to paint. So, with that said then, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye!